Hey, brother Robert.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we're live right now, and we
Okay.
will we will be discussing polygyny. And as a disclaimer, look, I mean, to the Black Hebrew Israelite, and a majority of Christians who've come into the truth. And when I mean truth, I mean the understanding that the law is not done away with. We know there's certain things that you cannot do versus what we like maybe have pre-received, like a couple examples, and I'll let you, Robert, mention one, mention a couple. I'll mention one. um we thought we could work on Saturday, right?
Yep.
Okay, and what are some examples that you thought that we could do in Christianity that you realize we can't do now?
An easy one would be like the dietary law. That one's kind of easy right there, low hanging fruit. I mean, I thought everything was cool as long as you pray over it.
Now, when you mean dietary law, for like people who listen in, what do you mean dietary law?
Well, the Most High has a few restrictions, right? He has some restrictions, like anything from the sea. If it doesn't have fins and scales, you can't eat it. That type of thing.
What in particular,
Also,
though? What in particular from the sea? Like, because
we can start like we can say crab, we can say shrimp, catfish.
that's a
Those
big
things
thing.
that. Yeah, it doesn't have scales. It has no scales. And so it was one of those things that, you thought, everything's fine. It's fine, but scripture says otherwise.
Okay, and not just with the dietary law. I mean, there's so many things that me and Robert we could go over.
Oh yeah.
But one of the things that we thought you couldn't do is polygyny. Now,
Yep.
polygyny, for people who may not be aware, is the idea that a man can have more than one wife. And we're not talking about, I mean, polygamy is an umbrella which
Correct.
includes polygyny,
Correct.
but there's Robert, I mean, you can assist me with this. What is it? There's other terms too, like
Absolutely. You got polygamy is the
polyandry.
umbrella term. Yeah, polyamory. Okay. Where poly means many. Okay. And amory is loves, many loves. Polygyny is just, a person married to, a person with more than one spouse. And then polyandry is a woman with more than one husband. And polygyny, which is the only one found in the Bible, is a man with more than one wife. So there's a lot of, and then of course they get into a lot of sub topics, subcategories, triads and open triads and closed triad and all that stuff and swapping and it has a whole menu of other things in there. But we're only dealing with one, which is polygyny.
Yeah, and so we want to make clear, not just for anybody who may be tuning in now, but anybody who may tune in later and listen to this lesson. Um, we encourage you to, because we might be paraphrasing particular scriptures, so we
Sure.
encourage you not to only go back and read these scriptures, but we also encourage you to also, like, for example, uh, there are certain things that we talk about, and we're encouraging you to understand like a baseline. So what I mean by that is this study is for people who already understand that the law is not done away with. So if
Correct.
if you go to church every Sunday, a lot of stuff that me and Robert are going to talk about, you're going to think we're crazy. But you have to understand that we're operating from a perspective of the law not being done away with. So to you, it may sound strange, but keep in mind that me and Robert are speaking from a perspective where we are operating from the capacity that the law, and when I say law, I mean the like the Torah, first five books of the
Correct.
Bible,
Correct.
that is not done away with.
Correct.
Now you still have to do those things.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think that you don't have to do those things, like what Robert was saying, like you can't eat crab, then you're not going to understand what we're talking about. You're going to think we're out of
Right.
our minds.
Correct.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Lord's willing, maybe we will talk about that one day. I don't know. It's not something that's kind of pressing on my spirit as of this point, but as of right now, like if you don't understand that, then you're not gonna understand this. And I would say you can listen to this conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, I would say that like, damn, maybe you shouldn't, because it's just gonna confuse you. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's possible. It's possible that it could confuse someone, especially well, if this is the first. I wouldn't recommend this as being like the first lesson of someone coming into the truth of scriptures, because they would be like, whoa, what are they talking about? You know, like whoa,
Hmm.
time out. So yeah, this is not a good first lesson slash discussion for a brand new person. So we put the disclaimer out there. So if you are brand new and you know you've never heard anything contrary to what you've heard on Sunday, you know this is not going to make a whole lot of sense to you. But if you're not brand new and you do have a little bit of an understanding, then then I encourage you to keep listening in. But if you're new, just stay in the background because it's going to be kind of a doozy.
Final thing. The reason. Now, I'm gonna state my reason, and I'm gonna let Robert state his reason.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the reason. Now, you might say polygyny. The title of this is "Polygyny is a Sin Refuted." So, by that title, we're asking, is polygyny a sin? And we're saying that it's refuted. So we're
Correct.
saying we're refuting the idea that it's a sin. How can we do this? Now, for me, the only reason why I'm talking about this is because there's another topic I want to talk about, um, which me and Robert are going to get to,
Sure.
which is biblical marriage, and can a woman divorce her husband? It is my belief that a woman can't. Now, you may say that's the thing I want to hear, but it came to my belief that you will not understand that subject unless you understand that polygyny is not a sin.
Right.
I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, Robert.
No. I agree with you. I think this would be more of a foundation. We got to set the foundation, and so if someone sees this, and then when we do our part two later, it'll make more sense because I think first we have to deal with what biblical marriage is, with a particular emphasis on polygyny. But we have to look at that from a biblical perspective, and so when we do get to part two, it'll start making sense because it'll seem like if we go straight to two, for those who are wondering, if we went straight to part two, talking about, hey, can a woman, divorce her husband and all that, then it's almost like we're just jumping in the middle of the story. We're jumping in, we're jumping straight to ending a marriage, and we haven't even established what a marriage is, biblically anyway. So I think that makes sense. And then, of course, when you're just saying, the reason why, for me, the reason why would be false conviction. Sometimes we work on the assumption that we're wrong about something and we may not be wrong about something, or we may think that we're right about something and we may not be right about something. It's kind of like when Paul wrote, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was just saying that I was alive once and then the law came and then I died.
Mm-hmm.
So once he had an understanding, he's like, oh, what I thought was right, I was wrong. Or you can reverse it. What you thought was wrong was right. It was actually okay. So that's really one of my reasons why here for this particular lesson and discussion.
Agreed. And so to start it off, speaking of polygyny, like the segment says, polygyny is a sin refuted. The first part of that is polygyny is a sin. So
Right.
how I kind of streamline this lesson is to break down every aspect. So what is sin? And the first scripture we can go to is First John 3:4,
Mm-hmm.
um, where people talk about, and I mean, well, in general, this is where we can get what sin is.
Yep.
Now, there's different versions you can read. I mean, they all say the same thing.
Yep.
I have pulled up on my computer right now the NIV version, and it says, 1 John 3:4. It says, everyone who sins breaks the law. In fact, sin is lawlessness.
Correct.
So, what that's saying is that, and the reason why you might say, well, why the hell we're going to this, is you have to understand that the Bible is kind of like a mathematical equation. And if you remember when we used to go to school, like if you didn't know the equation or the formula, you couldn't solve the problem a lot of
Correct.
times. And so to solve is polygyny a sin, we need like a basic formula to build on. And so the first thing is, well, what is sin? And sin is a
Correct.
breaking of the law. Now, when you
Correct.
say what law, I mean, it's the first 5 books of the Bible. And I want to stress that because this is going to play an important part in the future, because I have heard people mention that the law is the whole. I mean, Robert, I mean, I want you to give your input on this as well. I've heard myself that people have said that the law is the entire Old Testament.
Right. Right. I've heard that as well. Sometimes people will slyly give you a few little breadcrumbs, of scripture or law, and then walk you out of the Torah and into the prophets, and still have you think, oh well, that's whatever the prophet says here or there is also the law. And you're like, no, no. Once you leave the first 5 books, you're out into the writings or the prophets, or of course you can go to New Testament as well. But yeah, I think sometimes people will slow walk you right out of the Torah. And since I guess like in seminars sometime, or in sales, they'll say you're trying to get some yes agreement, some yes head nods and agreement, and then so they get that yes momentum. So for example, if I quote something out of Torah, I can quote something out of Exodus, I can quote something out of Leviticus, I can quote something out of Numbers. Now I'm gonna quote something out of Ezekiel. Now I'm gonna quote something out of Hosea. Those kind of things. And since these are prophets, people will kind of go with it. You have the momentum of yes. You have that momentum, and so they'll lead you to believe that you are still talking about or referring to the law. So I think there's some distinctions that need to be made, because I think that can be very misleading. I don't necessarily want to say deceptive, but it can be misleading if someone does that.
Agreed. Agreed. 100%. And so, uh, for people who are listening in now, or people who may listen in later on, you have to understand a baseline. And again, for the Christianity, and again, I don't know the ratio or aspect of those who listen in who may be of the Christianity perspective. You have to understand that we of the Hebrew community, when I mean Hebrew, I just mean that people, I mean, we believe Jesus is the Son of God, but we just don't believe
Yes.
that the law is done away with. And like, you have to keep the
Correct.
law. So
Right.
we've established that sin is breaking the law.
Correct.
And so the law in question that we are talking about is polygyny. Is polygyny breaking the law? And
Correct.
we've already went to 1 John 3:4. We know in 1 John chapter 1 verses 8 uh, and 9, it says, if we say we have not sinned, we deceive ourselves. If we confess our sin, we are forgiven. And it's a basic concept that everybody would agree with, that
Mm-hmm.
we have to say, nobody can say that I ain't ever do nothing wrong, right?
Correct.
And if you say that, then you're a liar. But if we say that, no, I ain't gonna lie, I did do a couple of things here and there, then we can be forgiven of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And which ties us into First John chapter 3, 8 through 10. And also, I want to keep in mind that, like, what I just did, I'm going into First John chapter 3, verses 8 through 10, but I
Mm-hmm.
just read First John chapter 1, 8 through 9. Now, I didn't actually read that. So I want to keep in mind for the people who are listening in at home, there are some scriptures that me and Robert might not actually go into.
Mm-hmm.
We might paraphrase it. And when I mean paraphrase, we're given a summary. You have to go back and read, as Timothy says, study to show yourself
Approved.
and to be an unashamed workman in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to study for yourself. And I encourage you, after what we say, regardless if we go into the scripture or not,
Mm-hmm.
to go back and read for yourself. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, whatever I hear, I'm not gonna lie, even if you read the scripture, I'm gonna go back and like pull up the scripture and go into the
Mm-hmm.
concordance and study it up. But a lot of people won't do that though. But you definitely
Absolutely.
have to do it because there's so much material, and this is just like part one. It's gonna probably be a trilogy.
Okay.
You have to go back and read it because we're not gonna have time to go back into every single scripture and read line upon line. Like we're just
Mm-hmm.
not gonna have time to do that.
Right.
But the next scripture we definitely want to go into is First John chapter 3, verses
Mm-hmm.
8 through 10.
Okay.
And it says, "He that committeth sin is of the devil, for the devil sinned from the beginning. For this purpose the Son of God was manifested, that he might destroy the works of the devil. Whosoever is born of God doesn't commit sin, for his seed remaineth in him, and he cannot sin, because he is born of God." So you might say to me, what the hell does this have to do with polygyny? Well, there's a couple things. Well, the fact is, I wanted to bring this scripture is because it says that he commits sin. We already know what sin is because we
Mm-hmm.
already established that sin is breaking the law. So whoever's breaking the law of God is of the devil. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And it says the purpose of the Son of God was manifested that he might destroy the works of the devil. Now, what are those works? In this particular scripture, it doesn't really specify what those works are, but it does say in verse 9, who's ever born of God doesn't commit sin, so they don't break the law, and they say that they cannot sin because he is born of God. And it says in verse 10, in this the children of God are manifest, and the children of the devil. Whosoever does not righteousness is not of God, neither he that loveth his brother. So you have to ask yourself, um, if polygyny is a sin, meaning breaking the law, we would say that it's obviously not a work of God. And we would also go as far as to say that it's not righteousness.
Mm-hmm.
And me and Robert are gonna show later in the lesson that not only does it show righteousness, it is something that is definitely done by God. So then how can you contrast and say that it's a work of the devil if God himself is saying it's okay?
Correct.
Robert?
Correct. No, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of examples of different things that the Most High or the Messiah, someone, that they have done, throughout the scriptures. But one of the things they don't really like in themselves is that of, sin or something that's unseemly or something that's abominable or something, something like that. The Most High really doesn't manifest himself in ways like that, in sinful ways, like that. So a lot of times people have a comparison or something like that, but I know once so far that I've never seen, the Most High or the Messiah, use or demonstrate something using sin, in that way. And I say that because a lot of the arguments that we're going to bring forth, some people they keep saying, well, it's this, it's that, or this is not right and stuff like that. But then when we see examples that contradict that, that's where I'm going with that. We see examples that contradict what they're saying, and then they don't really know they don't know where to go from there. So I'm just like, no, then it must not be wrong. It must not be wrong if he's doing it or if he's sanctioning it, or, but sometimes people, they get married to their own idea or their own doctrine and they don't want to give it up. So
Exactly. And to tie in what we're saying, I want to bring it back by discussing John chapter 8, verses 38 through 44. John chapter 8, verses 38 through 44. And I'll read it. And it says, "Speak that which I have seen with my father, and you do that which you have seen with your father." So we see a contrast here. We see Christ saying that, like, look, you're doing what you do of your old boy, your dad. I'm doing what I do of my dad.
Right.
Verse 39. They answered and said unto him, well, Abraham is our father. Jesus say unto him, if you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. So good. He's saying that, like, if you were truly Abraham's children, you would do the works of him, the actions of Abraham. Now, verse 40, now, but now you seek to kill me, a man that has told you the truth, which I have heard of God. This did not Abraham. This is not what Abraham did.
Right.
You do the deeds of your father. Then they said to him, we be not born of fornication. We have one father, even God. Jesus said unto them, if God were your father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth and came from God, neither I came of myself, but sent me. But why do you not understand my speech? Even because you cannot understand, you cannot hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and the lust of your father you will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Now you may say, what the hell does this have to do with polygyny? It has a lot, actually, because here Jesus is condemning the Israelites, because he's saying that if you were truly of Abraham's seed, you would do the works, meaning actions of your father Abraham, the actions of your ancestors, like doing the actions of your grandfather. But he's saying that they're not doing it. And he's saying that your actions are of your father, the devil. So now Abraham was a man who had more than one wife.
Correct.
He had Sarah and Hagar.
Correct.
And before we even dissect this and get into all but he only had her because of this and that, the fact is he had more than one wife. And yet Jesus is comparing Abraham's action as a righteous act, saying that, like, if you believed and you were like a righteous person, you would do the same actions as Abraham, a man who was polygynous. And yet you will condemn the very action of being polygynous and say it's like damnation or sin. Yet Abraham, in this context, Jesus is comparing as a righteous act.
Yep.
And, it's something that we have to break down, because before I even went to the scripture, even as I was going to the scripture, it probably made no sense why I was going here. But when you break it down like that, you start realizing, like, yeah, damn, that's true. Like, I mean, you would do the works of Abraham. What is Abraham's work? This man was a polygynist. So, okay, so if I want to be doing the works of Abraham, technically one of the works he did was having more than one wife. That's a reality, whether you like it or not.
Correct. If we introduce Genesis 25 verse 6, we see that it says, "But unto the sons of the concubines," with an S, "which Abraham had, he gave gifts." So they said concubines plural.
Yeah,
and that's in 25:26. And then of course it talks about in First Chronicle 1:32, it says, "Now the son of Keturah, Abraham's concubine," that kind of thing. So we talk a lot about Sarah and Hagar, but Keturah and the other concubines, plural, no one mentions. But this, and I only bring it up because this is one of the works of Abraham.
Yeah, that is one of the works of Abraham. Which a lot of people, it's funny to me that people just bring up the fact that, oh, Abraham, he was going to sacrifice Isaac. That's Abraham's work. Yeah, Abraham also had multiple wives, though. No, but that's because of Sarah. Well, I mean, that argument is crazy to me because it's like he still did it though. Like, would you say to a man, like, well, I was lonely and my wife wasn't giving me none, so I started talking to a transgender? You would be like, brother, you're in sin. You would condemn the action. You would never make an excuse for it.
Right.
But with Abraham, you make an excuse for his action. Oh, Sarah couldn't get pregnant.
Right. But the question remains, did he sin? That's the question.
Did he sin? Did he break the law? Well, there is no law written saying that a man can't have more than one wife. But there are laws mentioned that says a man can't be with another man, though.
Yep. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So they can make all the excuses, that they want, but the $1 million question is, was he wrong? They say, oh, well, that's just because of Sarah. Okay, I grant you that. Okay. I mean, his wife told him, take Hagar, take my handmaid. Okay, I get it. No argument. Did he sin?
Yeah, he did it. Which it's taking us to another baseline, which I want to establish. We already established that the law or sin, for example, is somebody breaking the law of God. And I want people to understand that they have to be committed into whatever they believe. Not just as this particular subject. So I want to go to Revelation 3:15, and I'm going to paraphrase it. So I encourage you to read it, but it's basically regarding being lukewarm. It's talking about what Jesus says, I would prefer if you were hot or cold, but you come to me lukewarm. So because of that, I'll spew you out my mouth.
Right.
And I mean, there's not really a big breakdown that you could break this down in many ways, but I want you to establish in your mind that that's how you have to approach scripture. Not hot, not either hot or cold. Like you have to pick a side. You can't be in the middle of this. Either you're gonna say polygyny is a sin, or you're gonna say it's not a sin. But you can't say, it's not a sin, but it's not the perfect will of the Father. It's like you're speaking double. Coming. Yeah. That's what we're getting into now. Now, Robert, I know you've probably heard a lot about this.
Oh my goodness! I mean, we did a show. Man, had to be about a little more than 5 years or whatever, and I was just going over all of the excuses, all of the the clapbacks. And that's one of them. The one you just said, well, it's not the perfect will of the Father and all that. And I'm like, oh my goodness, because it just doesn't make sense. The perfect will. Okay, great. Perfect will is that we're not supposed to die. Perfect will is that we're not supposed to sin. Perfect will is that we're supposed to be naked and farmers. Perfect. It's a whole lot of things. I mean, I don't understand. I just don't understand what I mean. Perfect will is that we're originally we didn't eat meat. So my point is, a whole lot has changed since then. We're so far away from the perfect will. It's not even funny. Now I understand that we have free will, and that's why we have what we have today, because you have a lot of people exercising their free will, starting with, you know, Adam and Eve, you know, exercising their free will. So this whole argument about the perfect will, well, you're going to have a whole lot, that's just going to open up a whole mess of questions, a whole plethora of other questions of what was the perfect will. You know, that's all it is. I mean, I don't personally, I don't think it's a defense at all, because if you pose that, then you need to address all the other things that are not the perfect will, not just this whole idea of polygyny. You got to address everything. Why are you wearing clothes? Why are we not on the farm? Why are you eating meat? You know, that didn't come in until after Noah left the ark. You know, why, you know, so many things. It's just so many things, you know. And I mean, I had arguments of that, arguments of, you know, this is not right. And oh my gosh. And then we're going to, and there's some other ones we're going to get into as we go. I don't want to jump ahead, but go ahead, brother.
Now, a big thing that I've heard is that the only women who accept polygyny, like, and we're gonna get into that because I don't even think, like I said, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but some people are under the impression that if you want to take a second wife, your first wife has to be okay with it, which we're gonna address a little later. But
okay,
even the women that do that, they make the claim that, well, they only accept it is because that's how they was before. And you may say, well, what do you mean by that? And well, some people say that those women who would let their husband take a second wife were whorish before they gave their life to Christ. Like, they kind of had that mindset, like that pimp mindset, like, dang,
right,
you know, he could do whatever he want to do, you know. And when they gave their life to Christ, because they had that mindset, that's the reason why they're okay. And my argument would be Sarah, Rachel, Leah, Abigail, and Achinoam. Did they have that mindset before, you know, serving God? Of course, you would say, no, they didn't. But you would say that women nowadays, they have this whorish mindset. Like, they were whores before, and that's the only reason why they are accepting of their husband taking a second wife.
Wow. It's just a false equivalent. I think people, when they don't meet the requirement, you know, and I don't, I can totally go somewhere else with it, but I'm gonna refrain from going somewhere else with it. When someone, I think, goes back to a quote I heard many years ago, and it says that people don't judge others as they are; they judge others, you know, as we are, right? And so, because they feel like, oh, they were utterly rejected, oh, I refuse, and that couldn't happen to me, and all that other stuff. So they're judging other people. We're like, wait a minute. So a person who's not like me, then it must be. And then, of course, they're going to generalize, or, you know, put them down, or, you know, oh, then they were just a bunch of harlots and kind of doing, they'll say things like, oh, this person has low self-esteem, or they don't know any better, or, you know, all these things that just, you know, really makes no sense at all. But again, in order for them to justify it in their mind, to get to for things to make sense from their own perspective, they have to do that. You have to say this and put other people down. They have to put themselves above someone else. You know, they have to put themselves above those women. Of course, they wouldn't say it out loud. I mean, obviously, if you said, hey, to the average female, you know, do you think you're better than, you know, the women that you just listed off, right? You think you're better than them? You're more righteous than them, or what? You know, they wouldn't dare say that, you know. Just like same thing on the men's side. It's like, would you say that Abraham or David or, you know, or Gideon or any of these other, you know, patriarchs, do you think, or they wicked? Do you think they're just wicked or whatever? Now, obviously, they may point to maybe an act of, you know, where they messed up just like the rest of us or whatever. But overall, if these people are going to make it into the kingdom of heaven, we know they are. Are you? And I'm talking about the same, I mean, it's like, we're talking about the same people who they're putting down, you know, who they're kind of slyly bashing, you know what I'm saying? So these same people who you have a railing accusation, the same people who you say, oh well, they did this, oh well, they said they did that. Okay, I grant you that. But we know they're getting in. What about you? So my question is, are you more righteous than they are? So you cannot just bring into question everything that they've done. Let's bring into question everything you've done. And at the end of the day, when we're done with that, they're getting in. We're not sure if you're getting in. You see? So I think they need to approach that with caution.
Yeah, exactly. And even there's like a confusion in the community where I've heard that polygyny is only accepted because of the cultural standpoint or the
Mm-hmm.
culture in general behind polygyny. And
Okay.
I've heard two things mentioned that I want to address. I've heard
Mm-hmm.
mentioned the Nubian text and the Hammurabi Code brought up to understand the culture. Now,
Mm-hmm.
for the viewers out there who may say, what the hell is the Hammurabi Code? It's a collection of 282 laws inscribed in an upright pillar. Now, you have to keep
Mm-hmm.
in mind that Hammurabi himself was a Mesopotamian king who ruled the Babylonian Empire, and the god he worshiped multiple gods,
Okay.
and one of them in particular was Marduk. Now, these things are mentioned to highlight the culture, to point out that polygyny was only used for specific reasons like surrogacy. That's a big thing that I've heard as
Okay.
well, especially in the case when the wife can't have children. They even say
Right.
that the surrogate mother is not even the wife. Like a great example of that, which I'm also against, by the way, and that's
Mm-hmm.
another subject, will be like Kim and Kanye. Like Kim
Okay.
and Kanye had a child, and they use a surrogate mother to carry
Mm-hmm.
the child. Some people think
Okay.
that's okay. Like I said, I'm not going to mention it here.
Different subject.
Uh,
Different subject.
but uh, according to the Bible, I mean, the child you have has to be your wife. Like you can only have a
Mm-hmm.
child with a woman who's your wife.
Mm-hmm.
But through the usage of technology, signs, people are able to get around that. You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
now Hagar is a great example. She was kind of used for surrogacy, but she was indeed called a wife. And
Yeah.
if she had not become one, the action that would have been committed was fornication.
Correct.
Like Hagar was called Abraham's wife. That's a fact.
Yes. Yeah. She was a wife. She was a wife.
Yeah,
Definitely.
she couldn't like somehow be with Abraham and still have his child and not be his wife, which is what we can do now through the usage of technology. Now,
Exactly.
so my question then will come: what's the reason of bringing up the Hammurabi Code? And I would say nothing. There's no reason to bring it up because you're bringing up laws of um, people who worship another god whose laws
Mm-hmm.
contradict the laws of our God, which is why God called Abraham from amongst those people and brought him into another land to establish his covenant. And we can see that in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the next scripture I will go into to further help allude to this, which I'm not going to
Mm-hmm.
read, but I would suggest you read Joshua chapter 24, verse 2. And it
Mm-hmm.
is basically building on this on what I'm talking about is the fact that God called Abraham out from his father Terah and Nakor to bring him on this side because they
Right.
worship other gods, and
Mm-hmm.
these gods had different laws. So some people try to quote like the actions or laws of other gods to bring up the case for polygyny. Like if you can do it, you have to do it under this circumstance. But it's like, yo,
No.
what the hell are you quoting? You feel me?
Yeah. Yeah. I have no idea that, well, one, just to circle back just two steps is I would add that, well, Hagar was not a baby mama. So she was a wife. So I want to add that, but then also, I don't want to sugarcoat it. The Bible is a patriarchal book, okay, and it has a bunch of patriarchs in there, and so it was a prerogative if they wanted to. Now, let me go on record and say this, because sometimes you hear people that they may say, "Oh, you don't have to do it," and all that. And I'm like, okay, neither one of us says you have to do it, nor does the Bible say you have to. It is an option. That's what it is. You can exercise option or not. Now, I said that to say this. The Bible is filled with, a bunch of patriarchs, okay? And it's simply their prerogative. I don't see anywhere, not one time, where they had to ask permission from anyone, including their elder, pastor, or wife. They didn't have to ask that. I just don't see it. I don't see it. Um, if someone was being vetted, they're like, okay, do you think this is a good person? Blah, 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 and all that. But for the most, no, I don't see anywhere where anyone had to ask for permission, because it is a patriarchal type book. And I think a lot of time people look at things from the lens from a Western or modern mindset. And I think that's a great mistake, because then if we do so, we will not be able to understand the culture. We will not be able to understand what they did. We won't understand their custom, things like that. I mean, you're talking about men who are traditional. We're talking about women who are traditional. And I don't know if we'll get into it, but again, like when Israel went off to war, okay. If a man, of course, and I'm paraphrasing, but if a man saw a woman whom he desired or whatever, he would take her as a wife. Now, obviously, I'm just paraphrasing. I know if she's a war bride, you take her as a wife. You take her home, pare her nails, cut her hair, let her mourn for 30 days, and all that. But anyway, my point is, still, there was no permission sought. It was just, hey, you saw her, you desired her, there you go, you can make her a wife, that kind of thing. And this is just in the scripture, and again, I just wanted to bring up the fact that it's a patriarchal book, and you're gonna have people who will come against you, or this idea of really coming against the scripture, because really neither one of us wrote it, so they're really just coming against what the scripture is saying.
Yeah.
But they're gonna come against it, and they're gonna bring all these scenarios, and they're gonna say, well, what about this? What about that? Or it's under these grounds, under these rules, or you got to be super rich, or you got to be. It's going to be something, but they cannot prove it in scripture. Go ahead, bro.
Yeah. It's always because there are two groups of thought. There are those who say you cannot do it under any circumstance, but then there's a group who's a little bit more learned, and they say. They realize that they can't speak against it, but they say,
Right.
all right, you could do this, but under these particular reasons. For example, one of the big reasons I wrote down in my notes is surrogacy. Well, it was only done with Abraham because Sarah couldn't have a child because she was too old. Now, can you imagine if the conversation had been different? Like, imagine if Sarah said, hey, Abraham, I think the problem is not with me. I think it's with you. And so I need to get another man to give me seed. And by the way, I'm not going to mention any names, but there was a man on this show. Again, I'm not mentioning any names. Who said that very same thing to me. He said that if the woman cannot get pregnant and it's because of the man, that she's allowed to get impregnated by another man. Now,
that is insane.
That wouldn't be polyandry, which is having more than one wife. That would be polygyny. I'm sorry. That would be polyandry. And that action is clearly condemned as adultery in the Bible. We all know that. But the fact that this person, and you might say, why are you teaching this? This is why, because sometimes when you try to justify the teaching of something that is allowed in the Bible, sometimes you'll go so far to the left that you'll start teaching crazy stuff. Like what I just mentioned, like, oh man, if he can't get her pregnant, then she can get another man to get her pregnant. And you'll start rationalizing it like it's true because you're trying so hard to teach against, like, for example, in this case, that polygyny is a sin.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. That, and first of all, I didn't know you were going to even say that. That's just absolutely insane. That is insane. well, since to tell your husband, well, since you can't give me seed, let me just go somewhere else. That is, wow, that's just insane. And I know some people are watching, they're thinking, they're like, wait a minute, but but a man can do it, if his wife can't, and he can just go somewhere else and all that. Okay, but that's okay in the Bible, and he's making her a wife, but it's not okay for a woman to do it. What do you want me to say? What do you want from me? One is okay, and the other one is not okay. So that's just insane. That's just insane.
Exactly. Now, what I want to do now, and again, it was time limited, so this is definitely going to be a two-parter.
Sure.
But because there's so many things that it needs to be covered, but I want to go with scriptures that are used against polygyny. There's a
Let's go get it.
lot of scriptures that people would use to say, "Oh, you can't be polygynous because of this scripture or that scripture." Um, and so I'm trying to do my best
Okay.
to. Me and Robert are trying to do our best to address every one of them.
Sure.
Again, this is part one. Um, we're not going to get to everyone in this part, so stay tuned for part two. But I want you to keep in mind that there is an agenda. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that they're doing it purposely because I don't know if they're doing it purposely. But sometimes when you hear certain scriptures mentioned, you do think, like, what the hell does that have to do with polygyny?
Correct.
Like, and you start thinking, like, are you doing this purposely? Like, are you trying to manipulate me? You start feeling like that. Some people
Mm-hmm.
are doing that, some people aren't. But I will say that people will cherry pick certain scriptures and certain words from those scriptures to indoctrinate you and manipulate you into believing their teaching. And so you have to be
Sure.
careful.
Right.
And I'm going to start calling out scriptures that you're going to see has nothing to do with polygyny, yet I hear anti-polygynists bringing this up all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I always find, like, what the hell, why the hell did you go here? Like, the first scripture I
Right.
want to go to is Genesis chapter 2 verse 18.
Mm-hmm.
And again, some of these scriptures I'm not going to go into detail and read. I'm going to paraphrase it, so I encourage you to read it on your own. But basically, in Genesis chapter 2 verse 18, God is saying it's not good for man to be alone, and that he should make a helper. And he calls a deep sleep, and he took a rib from Adam, right, to make Eve. We all know this scripture. It's the first book of the Bible. We all know
Mm-hmm.
that the woman Eve came from the rib of the one woman Eve. We all know this. So the argument that anti-polygynists make is they'll be like, you see, God took one rib and made one woman. You see,
Mm-hmm.
one. If it was
Right.
supposed to be polygyny, why did he make two women? He made one woman. Um,
Okay.
and then the reason why they bring this up again is to indoctrinate you, stressing one rib, one woman. This scripture doesn't even have anything to do with polygyny when you really think about it. I mean,
It doesn't.
not you don't have to even think about it. It doesn't.
It
And
doesn't.
remember, we're dealing with whether it's lawful, meaning can
Correct.
I do it versus can I not do it. And
Mm-hmm.
this scripture is it's surprising how often this is used to teach it. I mean, I must have heard, even in brother Robert, if you go back on Debate Talk for You and you check the archives and you just search polygyny, Robert has had his battles with anti-polygynists in his debate,
Yeah.
and I think I've even heard this used against him as well, like to try to prove that. Oh, you see, like it's crazy.
Yep. Absolutely. They try. They try it, and it just has nothing to do. It. I agree with you. It has absolutely zero to do with polygyny. But they like to try to extrapolate from this particular scripture. But I'm like, I don't know where they're going. See, oh, it's just one. Okay, guess what? That's for the Most High's purpose. That's all that was needed. Okay, and it still has nothing. It still has nothing to do with polygyny. But that's what he wanted to do. So are you telling me if he wanted to create two, he couldn't? If he wanted to, it's just it has nothing to do for the purpose that he wanted to fulfill at that moment in that time. That's what it was. He got one rib, made a woman. There you go. That's it. That's what he wanted. But again, it had nothing to do with polygyny. But people are gonna have spin their narratives. They're gonna
It's like
try.
it's like and they usually tie that with Ezekiel chapter 37, I believe, verse 15. And
Mm-hmm.
again, this is another scripture that I encourage you to go on your own and read it. But it's a
Okay.
parable. It's a parable, but it's
Mm-hmm.
regarding two sticks, which represent two kingdoms becoming one, regarding
Okay.
Israel. Now, it
Okay.
has nothing to do with a man or a woman, has
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with polygyny, but they'll be like, you see, two sticks becoming one. You see,
Mm.
one,
Okay.
one. See,
Ah,
one
see,
wife,
one.
one wife, and
One.
you'll be like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, um, like this has nothing to do with polygyny, but
Right.
they'll bring up that scripture in connection because you have to understand that the whole thing is indoctrination. So, what I would always say, sometimes in life, it's not the first thing that gets you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's like the second or third. And what I mean by that, when it
Absolutely.
comes to like indoctrination, it's not the first thing that's going to trick you. It's a series of things that slowly get you, and then you get manipulated and you start believing it. Like the first thing I
Mm-hmm.
said probably wouldn't get you, but if I would have said, "Oh, you see, God took one rib from Adam and made one wife, and then God made two sticks become one," and if I keep coming at scriptures like that with you, you might be like, "Damn, it is always one." It might trick you.
Yeah. That's just playing with words. That's all it is. No, that's all it is. They like to say, "Oh, it's one." Well, if that's the case, first of all, that has nothing to do with it. But if they want to play that game, what about when the Most High Himself said that He was married unto Israel and Judah?
Mm.
That's likened unto a polygynist. And liken Israel and Judah as a female. It says, and your treacherous sister Judah. How about, I was a husband unto them. So he likened himself to being married to Israel and Judah. Yes, I understand the kingdom was split and all that. But again, as I said way back in the beginning of our discussion, he likened himself unto a polygynist. Even in the New Testament with the 10 virgins, five foolish, five wise, it's still
Yeah.
likened unto a polygynist, still likened unto this. So why would he compare himself to something that's so bad, so sinful, so abominable? Why do that when he could just use a good example? When they in Ruth, what they do at what chapter 4, they gave them the Boaz and Ruth. They gave them the blessings of Rachel and Leah. Why give them the blessing? Why not give them the blessing of Isaac? Isaac only had Rebecca, so use that blessing. I don't. That's what I don't get. I don't understand why they would use those type of arguments when the Most High Himself or the Mashiach likened themselves unto polygynists. So,
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's like, I mean, at that point, yeah, I think you could counter them and say, "Oh, okay, well, show me in the Bible where the Most High said He had a husband."
yeah,
You can't
exactly.
show me. You can't show me that,
Yeah,
because that would be homosexuality, which is a
correct,
sin, which is
correct.
breaking the law, which is what we
Hmm.
established that God clearly is against. And if
Right.
God was so clearly against polygyny, then
Yep.
why would He liken it, like you said? Why would He liken Himself to such a sinful act?
Exactly. Why?
It doesn't make
Why would
sense. It would be like God saying, "Hear thou Israel, I have eaten the swine of the pig." It's like
Mm-hmm.
you be kind of shocked, like, what?
Thank you. Good example. You're like, what?
What? God, you ate swine? Even
Yep.
though you would say, well, he didn't literally eat the swine, he's being symbolic, but it's just the
E-
fact that why would he
exactly.
say that
Why would he say that?
when we
Exactly.
know we're
Why
not
would he
supposed to
say
eat
that?
swine?
Yeah, bad example. Exactly. That would be a bad example to teachers. That would totally confuse us. Like, wait a minute, why would you? Wait a minute, I don't get it. Why would you use that as an example? You know, that would be crazy.
And then the actions sometimes too, that I mean, or the feelings, I guess I will say, um sometimes it's the actions or the feelings of the wife,
Hmm.
sometimes dictate anti-polygynist mindset, or
Sure.
sometimes who they are. Like, for example, in Genesis chapter 4 verse 19, it talks about Lamech, who's a descendant of Cain.
Correct.
And he's the first man, actually, by the way, for the listener
Mm,
audience, to be mentioned with multiple wives,
right.
Ada and Zilich. And now,
Hmm.
anti-polygynists, they will say that, you see, polygyny is bad because he came from Cain. Cain killed Abel,
Yep.
so polygyny must be
Yep.
bad. And
Uh,
first off, what does that have to do with having more than one wife?
I have no idea.
Nothing. It got nothing to
Yeah.
do with polygyny. It doesn't speak against it. It doesn't. It doesn't speak
He
for it
just said
or
he had
against
two.
it.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Um, they also say it's proof. A big reason why I've heard is because it's not in the Bible, but it is found in the book of Jasher.
Okay.
It says that Lamech's wives hated him, and then they say, well, you see, he had multiple wives. In the book of Jasher, it says that he hated them. They hated him.
Interesting.
And then my thought process is, who cares?
Yeah.
I don't care if they hate him. I mean, because those same arguments that can be found in polygyny can be found in monogamy. I mean, there are some women, and it's one man, one woman, and the wife can't stand their husband.
Exactly. So what does that say? What
I
does
mean,
that say?
so that does that mean that that's not her husband? No, that's
Yeah.
still her husband. It just means she don't like him. And
Yeah.
that argument.
Exactly.
So, and we're going to see this further on, that a lot of the arguments that are made up and found in polygynous relationships can also be found in monogamous relationships. It's the same thing. And these
That
scriptures are cherry picked.
yeah, that's my argument as well, brother. It's that when they say that they try to use a bad example, right? They say, okay, well, why is it every example of polygyny, polygyny, it's bad in the Bible, right? So I use this exact same argument. I said, okay, so if I see a bad example of monogamy, is monogamy off the table now? Okay, let's start with the very first marriage, Adam and Eve. It produced a murderer. So we should
Yeah.
not get married at all. We not do that because you see, because they say, oh well, one has nothing to do with exactly my point. So when you point out a quote unquote a bad polygynous relationship, it usually has nothing to do with the polygyny at all. Nothing at all. So the same thing. If I say, okay, Adam and Eve, that's monogamy, that's a bad marriage because it produced a murderer. If I go Ananias and Sapphira in the New Testament or whatever, they both got killed. They were married. They both got killed. They both were just, thieves and stuff like that. Monogamy doesn't work. Of course, you'll probably laugh me to scorn because you say, well, that has nothing to do with it. Well, it's the same thing with the examples when they use polygyny. And I would also like to add, give me one rebuke by the Most High or the Messiah or a prophet that says that condemned a man for doing it.
Hey, you won't find that.
So
You
I
won't find
don't.
you won't find one example of that. And not only
Yeah.
that, again, this segment, this part is about, like I said, I'm trying to bring up every scripture that I have found personally of what I've heard an anti-polygynist say. They bring up
Mm-hmm.
strange scriptures too.
Mm-hmm.
That it's crazy how they can connect it. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's ingenious how they can do it. But
It's
like, one
clever.
scripture, for example, is like First Corinthians chapter 7:23, and
Go
it's
ahead.
I'm gonna paraphrase it, but it's talking about how you are bought with a price. Be not you servants of men. And of course, at first glance, you're gonna be like, okay, what the heck does that have to do with polygyny, having more than one wife?
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
people use this scripture and say that, well, you see, it's talking about not being bought with the price. So it's talking about slavery, and like slavery is something that was done in the Old Testament and it was allowed, but it wasn't exactly God's will, like polygyny.
Right.
And that's how far they'll, I mean, they'll stretch it. And you'll be like,
Ooh, that's a
damn,
reach, man. Oh, that's a reach.
like that's ingenious that you took this scripture and you went there. Now, this is a whole nother subject, but I will say this. Like, first off, slavery was God's will, and I would quote that the only example of slavery God didn't, he wasn't profound on, was in Exodus 21:16, which is men stealers, which is an example of what happened to the African community with the European,
Right.
trade slave. Like,
Right.
you just randomly going up to a random man and you just grabbing him.
Correct. Correct.
Now, God doesn't like that, but God had no
Correct.
problem. I mean, first off, we're even called, it's even said in the Bible that we were bought with a price, with the precious blood of Christ.
Right.
So we are slaves.
Right.
But people don't think that deep. But they'll try to say, well, see, we're not supposed to be, God was okay with slavery, but like he was like no, they'll say God wasn't okay with slavery, like polygyny, but it's something he kind of batted an eye with. And it's like they would never say that with homosexuality, though.
Right. Right. No, the problem is they don't understand there's two different types of, slavery. There's chattel slavery, like man stealing, like you were saying. Children of the diaspora, that is bad, what quote unquote bad slavery, because you were stolen, you just snatched up, ripped from your home, torn, your family torn apart, thrown, put yokes around on your neck and shackles, thrown on a ship, and then you're shipped out into the four corners of the world. Okay, now the Most High did allow that, but that's not the only type of, slavery. Obviously, someone could sell themselves back then, could sell themselves into slavery.
Yeah.
Okay, when it was time for a slave to be released, okay, that slave can choose to stay with his master, and he'll get an awl in his ear or earring or something. He can choose to stay. Oh, if I love my master. Okay, people, I'm paraphrasing. So what I'm saying is, it's more than just one type of slavery. But let me ask you something. I don't know if you're going this direction or not. But let me ask you, what do you say for those who say, well, men are only doing it for their lust, to satisfy their lust?
Well, the funny thing about that is that, yeah, they are doing it for that. I mean, that's the reason why they married your butt in the first place. I mean, uh, what confuses me the most is that women actually are under the assumption that a man married them. And I was actually, I'm actually, where do I have that? And I'm actually gonna get into that later. But you know what? We can get into it right now. Let me
Okay.
see. Hold on a second. I want. It was regarding um what anti-polygynists say about that men are only looking out for their own needs, their own
Okay.
selfish desires, their
Okay.
lusts.
Okay.
And it's like, yeah, that's the reason why I got with you in the first place. Now, there's a difference between selfish and unselfish. Now, if you go ahead and do a quick Google search, selfish is of a person or action or motive lacking consideration for others, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure. An example of this would be in Deuteronomy 21:11, and it's about having captive slaves. So if you go to Deuteronomy 21:11, I'll paraphrase it. In a nutshell, it's
Right.
basically like if Israel went to fight with the country, Israel won, and now of the captive slaves, there's a
Right.
woman of the slaves, and you're like, damn, she fine. Damn, she really fine. And you can take this woman to be your wife.
Right.
Um, but what she has to do is pare her nails,
Yeah.
and she has to shave her head, and
Shave her head.
you
Yeah.
have to wait 30 days.
Yeah.
And after that, it says you can go into her.
Yep.
So I mean, that's pretty selfish. I mean, she don't got no choice. It's not like she could say, "Oh no, I'm good." No, she got no choice. So I think that would be a
Right.
great example of selfishness.
Right.
I mean, the reason for this is uh it's a show that you can do this, that and it's a selfish act. Now, what would be an unselfish act? I think a great example of an unselfish act would be if anybody in the listening audience um is familiar with Boaz and Ruth.
Correct.
First of all, Ruth is a Gentile
Hmm.
that, first off, Boaz wasn't supposed to marry her at first. It's supposed to be
Right.
somebody else. But he was like,
Hmm.
hell no, I ain't marrying her. But
Hmm.
Boaz was like, you know what? Because of how kind she is to Naomi, I'm going to
Hmm.
fulfill that and take care of her. So
Right.
Boaz's only reason for marrying her was because of the actions of Ruth, and he wanted to help her and assist her and Naomi. That's unselfish by definition. But selfish, by definition, is the act of looking out for your own personal self interest, which is what we
Correct.
all do when we.
Hmm.
I've never met a woman, and I'm pretty sure no man who's ever married ever said, "Look at that woman over there. I know she's going through some tough times, and
Hmm.
you know what? I'm gonna take off her burden." No, you got with her because you like, damn, she fine, she pretty. I want her
You're
to be my
attractive. Yeah.
wife. Yeah, it's selfishness. It's your own personal self-interest, your own lust, by the way, which is what Paul said in the book of Romans. He said, I only know what lust is because of the law. And it
Yeah.
said, thou shalt not covet. And
Correct.
to covet is to lust. So
Correct.
you can lust. It's just you can't lust after things that don't belong to you, like that belong
Correct.
to another man.
Correct.
Like
There's two different things. Yeah.
if the woman is like if the woman is obviously married, well,
Correct.
like the 10th commandment said, thou shalt not covet another man's wife, meaning
Mm.
you're lusting after another man's wife. So,
Hmm.
but if she's single, you're free to do that, which is
Correct.
gonna be a big part to play in this, because I've even heard people try to uh,
They.
use that to say that,
Yeah.
like, how do you even take a second wife? Like you shouldn't even
That's
be looking at
cheating.
a
That's
yeah you
adultery.
yeah you shouldn't even be looking at another woman if you're already married. Well, then how the hell did I look at you?
I was gonna say that you got to start there first. How? Okay, they will get, and it's kind of being self righteous. They will get to the point where they're saying, okay, well, like you just said, well, you can't look at another woman, don't lust after a woman, and this thing. Okay, so wait a minute. So it was okay for me to lust after my first wife. That was okay, but it wasn't okay for me to lust after another. Even sometimes it can be your wife or a woman saying that to you. It's like, okay, so wait a minute. So it's okay for your husband to lust after you, but no one else. And so now what we'd have to do to help some people out, and again, I don't want to derail where we're going, but we have to kind of get into what is adultery, since we are talking about biblical marriage, talking about polygyny. Okay, so what is adultery? So we have got to give them that firm foundation, because the deeper we go, it's going to confuse people if they don't know what adultery actually is. So we got to go to that one. Then, of course, we got to go to the 10th commandment. So we have to go to thou shalt not commit adultery, what that is, and then we have to go to the 10th commandment of not coveting, so that it'll make sense to them.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? I actually didn't say that at the beginning. And I should have said it. Thank you for reminding me. People have to keep in mind that uh the New Testament doesn't trump the Old Testament, which is
No.
surprisingly what people, a lot of, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I used to think that too, or when I
Mm-hmm.
was unlearned. But
Mm-hmm.
um certain words have certain definitions that mean
Mm-hmm.
certain things.
Yeah.
And it's like if I say I have headphones on, well, I know what headphones is because I know the definition of headphones. But
Mm-hmm.
just because thousands of years later you come up with a new definition of headphones, that doesn't change what headphones are, though.
No, no.
But people will say that it does. Like, and one of the examples they use is adultery. Because if you look at the Hebrew definition of adultery, and actually this is something that's going to be more covered on the divorce portion.
Sure.
Uh, but I will say this: adultery in Hebrew is a completely different definition of the Greek meaning. But some people will say, well, Jesus, New
Mm-hmm.
Testament, Jesus, Greek. So that's what it means. And it's like, well, I mean, that's not what it was in
Yeah.
the entire Old Testament, though.
Right.
And
But
and you got
Jesus was Hebrew. But go ahead.
and you have to understand that, like, well, when Jesus was on the scene and he was talking at that particular time, was there even a New Testament?
Exactly. Did not exist.
Didn't exist. And it was only the Old Testament. So what the heck was Jesus quoting? The Old Testament. And what was his understanding of that Old Testament? A Hebrew mindset. And what did these Hebrew words mean? Like adultery. Like, for example, a
Correct.
woman who breaks a wedlock, which some people will, it's surprising, like that will try to twist the hell out of that, which is crazy. Um, like all the scriptures that they try to twist, like, for example, pulling it back to the polygyny. um
Mm-hmm.
they'll quote Genesis 25:21, right? And in that scripture, again, a lot of scriptures I'm paraphrasing, you have to go read for yourself, because
Correct.
I'm trying to get enough information out in the smallest amount of time. But
Sure.
Genesis 25:21 is where Isaac is praying for Rebecca because she's barren. She can't
Correct.
um have a child. Unlike Abraham's
Mm-hmm.
case, where Sarah couldn't have a child, and instead of Abraham praying for Sarah, Sarah gave Hagar and said, "Hey, I can't have a kid. Take my slave and
Mm-hmm.
let it go down." And so some people will say that, you see, this is a great example of what monogamists should do. Instead of
Right.
being quick to take a second wife because your wife can't have a child, you should have been praying to God. You don't have faith. But what they are subconsciously saying without even realizing it is they're saying that Isaac has more faith than Abraham,
Yeah.
because Isaac prayed for his wife and Abraham didn't. Even though it says Abraham was counted righteous by faith, yet they imply
Right.
Isaac had more faith simply because he didn't take another wife to have a child. That would be
Correct.
like, to be honest, that would be like if I was sick and I went to the hospital. Like, I'm sick for whatever reason, and you were sick, but you didn't go to the hospital, and you said, "I ain't gonna lie, brother Danny, like, I ain't gonna lie, you don't got that much faith." I'd be like, "How?" You be like, "Cause you went to the hospital. I just prayed to God." You would think that, nah, man, you tripping. Like, that's you who didn't go, man. I probably got a serious condition. But there are some people who account themselves extra righteous, or whatever you want to call it, and they try to put these stigmatisms on you of not having as much faith as you should, simply because you do one action or another versus if they don't. And again, like what we see with Isaac and Abraham, you see Isaac had more faith. He just
Right.
prayed. He just
Right.
prayed. Abraham didn't do that. He took Sarah. Why didn't Abraham pray?
Right. No, you're right. Some people get a little over righteous in in their assessment. And I don't get it. I don't understand why they do it. But again, they use all these different examples, and it always circle back from me, where I'm saying, okay, so yeah, Isaac, yeah, he prayed for his wife. Does that make Abraham wrong? Did Abraham sin? All it is that we just have different examples. Isaac knew he had the option of polygyny. Why? His father was a polygynist, and he knew it. It wasn't a secret, but he chose not to take another wife. That's his option. It's up to him. Period. There are people who choose not to get married at all. You can choose that too. Guess what's okay? Guess what's okay with the in the Bible and what's okay with the Father and the Messiah? You being single is okay. You being monogamously married is okay. And you being in polygyny is okay according to the scriptures. These are all options. You know, Paul espoused, hey, being single. I wish you were all like me, be single. You know, so I mean, it's just an option. It's just an option. And on a side note, whenever you want, I can read some of the questions over in the chat if you want to hit those. I mean, if we have time and if you want to.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
Okay.
I think the next part, the next scripture I want to address. Now, this is supposed to be their kryptonite. It's Deuteronomy 17:17, and it's regarding.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
It's regarding a king not multiplying wives unto himself. Again, Deuteronomy 17:17. You know what? Actually, this might be. Let me pull it up because this actually might be one I actually want to read.
Go ahead.
Hold on.
You're in trouble now, brother. You're in trouble now. Can't multiply. You're in trouble now.
Where is it at? Let me see. Okay, so Deuteronomy 17:17. It says, "Neither shall he multiply wives to himself, that his heart not turn away. Neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold." All right, so now people will bring this up and be like, "I got you." Like it said, not to multiply wives. The king is not to multiply wives unto himself. So how can you be a polygynist? First of all, there's a lot of factors to understand here. One, I'm not a king. First off, it says this law is actually applying to the king of Israel.
Correct.
There can only be one king of Israel. So how can this be to the regular man, like
everybody,
like you and me? Like, I'm not the king of Israel.
I'm not the king of Israel.
Not only that, it also is talking about. You have to understand. A lot of people just focus on the multiplying part, like of the wife.
Yeah.
But if you read like the whole thing in context, it also says that the king can't multiply silver and gold, and he can't multiply horses.
Correct.
So, if by that logic, if you mean multiply, you mean adding more than one. So that means not only can he not have more than one wife, he can't have more than one horse, and he can't have He can't have more than one piece of silver or gold.
That's
by
correct.
that logic.
Or more than one horse.
Yeah, he can't have more than one horse, so he can only have one wife, one horse, one piece of silver, and one piece of gold.
Exactly.
Now, we would all say, besides the wife part, we would say, I ain't gonna lie, that sounds pretty crazy. Like maybe the horse, because we live in America and nobody even owns a horse anyway. We own a car, but we can apply the horse concept to a car. I mean, some people have multiple cars.
Yep.
I mean, do you have only one car? And back in the day when there was no invention of cars, people had multiple horses. They had carriages. And so you're gonna tell me that in Deuteronomy 17 that God intended that the kings of Israel, not even the regular man, this is specifically for the kings, that he could only have one wife, one horse, one piece of silver, and one gold. Well, I'm going to break your bubble. I'm going to give you, I'm not going to go into these scriptures. I'm going to give you these scriptures for the listening audience. I suggest you go back and read them yourself. Well, God actually, the kings actually did do this. Well, David in particular did do this. He did this in 2 Samuel chapter 8:4, 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 30, and 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1 through 9. And those three scriptures are examples of not only him having multiple wives, he's having multiple pieces of silver and gold, and he's having multiple horses. And again, I'll give them one more time. 2 Samuel chapter 8 verse 4, 2 Samuel chapter 12 verse 30, and 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verse 1 through 9. And you have to keep in mind that in 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 8, God himself said to David that, like, I'm the one who gave you all your wives. And if that wasn't enough, I would have given you more.
Yep.
So then that means God contradicted himself in Deuteronomy 17:17.
Correct.
He would have to have contradicted himself. But obviously, think about what was the reason he said not to multiply wives. He said so your heart would not be turned away. Now,
Exactly.
if you have, I mean, first of all, like Brother Robert said, Paul advocated for celibacy. He said it was for, being fully committed to God, which obviously, if you're single, I mean, all you're going to do is worship God.
Yep.
But if you have a wife, you might be, you're going to be distracted if she want to go to the movies. And if you got two, okay, now both of them want to go to the movies. And if she wants to go to see this movie, she wants to go out to eat. Now, if you got three, and you see how this becomes a problem, and eventually if you have too much, your heart can turn away from God, as we see with the case of Solomon, who had 1,000 wives, and they were pagans, and he started listening to the example of his wives and started turning away from God. So this is what God was warning against. It wasn't so much as a stipulation, which is what people try to paint it out to be. Robert, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna add a little bit. I also don't want people to forget that the word there is said multiply, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is because people they want to make that to also mean add, but in the Hebrew they had the word add, and it says when it had, like for example, when it had to do with the law, it says thou shalt not add nor take away, right? So we have the word add there, but in Deuteronomy 17:17, he said you shall not multiply, right? So if I marry a woman now and then marry another woman a year later, did I add or did I multiply? I simply added. You know, did I marry another woman a year later? Did I add or multiply? I just simply added. I added. You see what I'm saying? So, but they want to make it to mean, they want to make multiply also mean add. You know, if I'm just getting one, then another, I am just adding. I actually had a debate with one guy. And I said, wait. Why? And I said, why are you making adding and multiplying the same thing? He said, no, brother, that's the. I said, wait. So if you're teaching your child 1 + 1 is 2, 2 + 2 is 4, and so on and so forth. And I said, you're teaching your child also 2 × 2 is 4. I said, it's the same. I said, aren't those 2 different things? Adding and multiplying, aren't those 2 different things? Oh, brother, you're just trying to be tricky. That's just the same thing. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm literally talking about 2 different things. Adding and multiplying is 2 different things. We learn in grade school and elementary school, the 4 basics: adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. The derivatives of each other, but it's not the same. I'm like, and he really wanted to do that to try to make his point. Me personally, I think it's pretty pathetic to do that when especially we have both adding and multiplying, and then we also, it's like you said, it's just something that has to do with our understanding, especially with the fact that it says, okay, don't multiply. And then you give the references where David did all those things. More than one wife, more than one piece of gold, more than one piece of silver, more than one horse, all that. So I'm just, it just goes back to our understanding. But people will say anything to try to make their point. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, they would. I mean, even from the scriptures we've gone over, it's. I mean, again, maybe some people haven't heard of these scriptures that we've gone over, but it's crazy how people would try to pull anything out of the woodworks to justify their point. In some scriptures, I'm not gonna lie, they're a little bit more obvious, so I'll give them credit. Like, for example, 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 2 and 12, and Titus chapter 6, and this is dealing with the husband of one wife. And so you already know what this scripture is. They'll be like, you see, it says a bishop has to be the husband of one wife. You see, you can't have more than two. I got your butt. And then
Okay.
the first thing I would say is that this isn't talking about everyone. First off, like we just went over in Deuteronomy 17:17, it was addressing the kings of Israel, not the regular man. So you're kind of putting yourself in a conundrum, because now if you're saying that this scripture proves a man can have multiple wives, well, this is just saying I can't be a bishop. It doesn't say I can't have one. So okay, I'm cool with that. I can't have two wives. If I have two wives, I can't be a bishop. All right, fine, cool. That's the only thing you're setting yourself up for. Is
That's
that
really all it is.
yeah, I just can't be a I can't be a bishop. But first off, the text is talking about this in context, because the reason why it states that you need at least one, which is how I interpret it, is because it says in context that if he doesn't know how to like manage his own household, how he gonna deal with the people of God? So it's saying that you need a wife is because you got to have some skills. You have to have some qualifications, which is what I mean. It doesn't
some
say
management skills.
It doesn't say that you can't have more than one. It's saying you at least have to have a wife. We would agree. We would agree. I mean, contextually, we would agree that you can't be single and be a bishop, right? Right or wrong?
Correct.
Okay, we would agree. We would agree to that. But we can agree on that you can't have more than one wife, because it doesn't say that. But we would agree that I ain't gonna lie, bro. You got to have at least one wife, because it say you got to have one wife.
Yeah, and you know it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that. I'm sorry, my camera moved a little bit. It's interesting that you say that, because that Greek word there is mia, the one for one, which could also be rendered as first, right? And it can also be rendered as you said earlier, at least one, right? So you got to have a first wife, or rendered as at least one, right? So that I could say, okay, well, as long as I still have my first wife, whatever they take that to mean, as long as I still have my first wife and I have 5 more or whatever, as long as I still have my first, then okay, cool. Got to be husband of your first wife, or at least one. Now I interpret it as at least one, but that's what I'm saying, because they have a Greek word for the number one, right? And the word, like for example, when it says, and on the first day of the week in the Greek, you see what I'm saying? So they have, and they have words for at least one, and they have words for, only one. It's 2 different words. And Mia is at least one, or first.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's crazy. For argument's sake, let's rock with their way of thinking. Okay. A bishop can't have multiple wives. And you know what? Nobody can have multiple wives. But think about that reasoning. Why would Paul even have to say that? Like why would he even have the need to say that? The obvious common sense would dictate that there are brothers who have more than one. Because if everyone only had one wife, why would Paul even need to say you have to be the husband of one wife? If one wife is the common standard of procedure. Like if one wife is the common norm, why would Paul even need to say that regarding a bishop? Obviously, it's because you got to have at least one in order to be a bishop, not because you can only have one. Because if you can only have one, then that means that Paul is aware that people are having multiple wives, which still proves that polygyny is not a sin and that everybody was doing it. You're on mute, by the way, brother.
Okay, there you go. No, you're absolutely correct, brother.
Thank you.
Absolutely correct. I don't know. I think people are choosing to. I don't know if it's cognitive dissonance. I don't know if there's a personal bias there. I don't know if it's a pet doctrine. I don't know what it is, but it's something that's causing people to just I mean, just twist, warp, and distort, you know, the scriptures, you know, not, I mean, like I said, not one, I mean, I think at least one accusation that says, hey, you know, no, you can't do this, or one dude being condemned for it. I mean, anything, you know, and there's nothing there that condemns. But again, they want to go to these different scriptures, you know. I don't know if you're going to get
I
to,
mean,
uh, having their own, you know. I don't know if you wanted to go there, or that's
oh yeah, yeah,
another
yeah,
lesson,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah,
they have
yeah,
that one
yeah,
too.
yeah. We're gonna get there. You know,
Okay.
I think the big reason is I think polygyny in general is just um I mean, and you know, it's looked at as sexual perversion. That's the reality. But
Correct.
my question would
Correct.
be: is marriage looked at as sexual perversion? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's usually nice. Looked at like,
Exactly.
oh, soulmates, they're in love. Like we see
Right. Exactly.
these rom
Love,
coms,
soulmate, yeah, family, yeah.
but you don't look at it as sexual perversion. But I
Right.
think the same concept of polygyny could be looked at as in monogamy. Like, well,
Mm-hmm.
maybe he just looked at it because he wanted to sleep with somebody, and that's the only reason why he married her.
Right.
Just like you're saying, he only married a second wife because he just wanted more. He wanted more options. It's the
Right.
same thing. I mean, he's still only doing it because he wants to sleep with somebody. Just like in monogamy, he only. First off, I would challenge any brother to come on here before you and me and say that is not the only reason why they got married. If they say that before you and me, they're a damn liar. I only got like brothers only get married because of that. If you say, "Oh, that's not true," I just wanted to spread my seed. I wanted that, bro. You lying? You lying? I mean, now I'm not saying that's not the case. There's some rare cases. Okay, I would say, why'd you get married then? It was lust. You were
Yeah,
horny. You were
yeah.
horny.
Initially,
Like that's
that's
why
how
you
it
did it.
starts. Yeah, that's how it starts. It's called attraction. You know, that's how it
Look
starts.
at
You know.
Paul. Look at Paul. Paul
Yeah.
and John the Baptist. They got to a point where they were evolved, and Paul said straight up, "You should be like me." Like Paul got to a point where he loved Christ so much that he didn't even require it. And what did Paul say? He said, "It is, but if any man can't contain, it is better to marry than to burn or lust."
Exactly. Exactly. That's how I felt about it. You know, and you're right. When you have a family and all that, you get distracted because you're concerned about your wife, you're concerned about your kids, you're concerned
Yeah,
about their future, you're concerned about your legacy, you're concerned about so many other things. So I see why he said that. You know, and again, you know, guys do they do think about those things. You know, they consider that. But I agree with you. You know, the first thing there is attraction, right? That's the first thing. There's just like they don't look at a woman and be like, hey, you know, wow, I can
wow,
see
you have a
10 children of,
degree. You have a
yeah.
degree. Wow, I'm not gonna lie. You have a degree in philosophy. That is quite attractive. That's
That
pretty
is very
amazing.
attractive. Yeah,
That's
I
a damn
know.
lie, man. You first of
Yeah.
all, why'd you even approach her? Is my
Yeah,
question.
exactly.
She looked pretty. Well, what then we have to
Exactly.
break down what does pretty mean? Well, pretty means that you find something physically attractive that stimulates your psyche, and that's why you.
Yep.
It's like we can get
That's
petty
it.
with this, but
Yes.
that's why. And then I would have to question you. Okay, why are you even talking to her? And
Yeah.
then I'm gonna have to question you and be like, what is it you hope to accomplish with this woman? Oh, I want to be with her. What do you
Exactly.
mean you want to be
What
with
do you
her?
mean by that? Yep. You got to
What do
get
you
petty.
want to do with this woman?
Yeah.
You want to
Why?
do something, huh? Like,
Yeah.
and then we can get like very descriptive and very explicit with it, but that is the causality of what you
Yeah.
hope to accomplish with this woman. It wasn't
Right.
just because of her degree in philosophy. It's a damn
Right.
lie.
Right. Yeah.
And and then people ascribe to like uh especially with pastors or particular positions, like a good example would be First Peter chapter 5 verse 3. And
Okay.
this is a scripture where Peter, in this verse, First Peter 5:3, where Peter is calling himself an elder and saying elders are to be examples to the flock.
Okay.
So they'll say, well, Peter, we know from scripture, only had one wife, and he's an elder. He's an example to the flock. So we have to follow the example that Peter set, and we can only have one as well. Now, first off, there's two things to break down.
Okay.
Damn, is everybody an elder? Just like we were talking
Right.
about with the bishops. Damn, is
Mm-hmm.
everybody a bishop? Is everybody a king? First of all, we're not all kings. We're not all
Right.
bishops. We're not
Yep.
all elders. So that's exclusivity.
Yeah.
But even if you want to apply that to me, okay, if you are saying based on this scripture, I have to be an example to the flock and follow Peter's example, well, what about Paul? Like we were just talking about. Paul said
Yep.
to be like him, and he didn't even have a
Yep.
wife. So am I
Exactly.
supposed to be single? Are you going to tell me? And then Paul talks about that there are people forbidding to eat meat and forbidding
Yep.
marriage. And he
And
was
forbidding marriage. Yep.
that was I think in the book of Romans.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you have to dig a little deeper and realize that not only does this not apply to everybody, you have to understand that people are examples to the flock
Correct.
on their own particular path, and that their path may not be the path that you're destined to walk on, like Peter, who had one wife, or Paul, who had none.
Correct. Correct. Absolutely. No, actually, excellent point. Excellent point. They look at, it's funny because they'll look at one example and don't look at another example, you know. So again, like I said, like we said earlier, you know, Paul espoused being single, you know, and I don't see anybody blowing the trumpet saying, hey, everybody be single. You know, no one's saying that, you know, even though it's okay to be single, but no one's blowing the trumpet of that. Hey, everybody break up, everyone just be single, focus on God, and that's it, right? But and they're silent on that. But when it comes to this particular topic, you know, the detractors, they have something to say. I'm like, okay, you can say whatever you want, but can you show me it is forbidden?
Exactly. And then they will go into like stressing crazy examples to try to prove that it's forbidden. Like one example that they'll try to use is 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 26, and this is dealing with Elkanah,
Okay.
who has two wives. One of them is Penina, and she has children, and his other wife is named Hannah, and she had none, and Penina is called Hannah's adversary. And so they'll be like, you see, that's why you can't have multiple wives. You see, damn, if you have two wives, the second wife is going to be the adversary of the first wife. Well, number one, the reason why she's called the adversary is not only because one has kids and she doesn't, but it's also because the one who has kids is teasing her. It says it in the scripture in 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 26, which I encourage anybody to read. It says that she's teasing her because she doesn't have kids. So you're saying that this is only exclusive in a polygynous relationship? That's a damn lie. I mean, that's like if you're married. Now imagine a man and a woman are married, just monogamous, and then there's another man and a woman who are married. One of them have kids, like the first set has kids. You know what? It would be like a great example. It would be like if I had a wife and I had one child, and you had a wife who had and you had no kids, and my wife was going to your wife and saying, I ain't gonna lie, you slipping, you don't got no kids, I ain't gonna lie. Like she's teasing her. She would be her adversary.
And brother, I can give you another adversary, and I'll just use you. I'll still use one man in the same situation in a non-polygynous relationship. Okay, put it like this here. We have this concept today, which the Bible doesn't recognize, but we have this concept today called baby mama. So you can have a child with one woman, and then you can I guess used to be dealing with, you know, another woman or whatever. Now these women you're not in a polygynous relationship with, but one could tease the other for not having a child or not giving you a son or whatever the case may be. You know, they tease each other that, you know, you can have a quote unquote a baby mama tease another one and you're not in a polygynous relationship.
Yeah, it's true.
So now and you see what I'm saying? So you're talking about the same guy, you're dealing with multiple women, and you're not even in a polygynous relationship. So does teasing all of a sudden disqualifies polygyny? I don't think so. You get teasing now. You know, you get that now. So no, I do not think that disqualifies it.
No, it doesn't at all. And that I think that type of thinking, and along with the indoctrination, like another great example of the indoctrination, I would say, is Amos chapter 3 verse 2, which actually, and I want the listening audience to know all these scriptures that I'm saying. The reason why I'm saying them is because I heard them on Debate Talk for You. This is where I heard them at, and I wrote them all down. And it was like people who was like anti-polygynous, and so I wrote down the scriptures they used and what they said. So that's where I'm getting these scriptures. I'm not just making these scriptures up. This is stuff that I actually heard on air. And again, Amos 3:2, and it goes like this. It says, "You have I only known of all the families of the earth, only you." And so they'll say, like with Ezekiel 37 and all the other scriptures, they'll be like, you see, it said only you of the families of the earth, only you one. Like Ezekiel 37, two sticks becoming one. Like Adam and Eve, one rib, one wife. And so these scriptures, it's not the one scripture that gets you. But if you were to hear the scripture from Genesis with the one rib coming from Adam, making one wife, and you heard Ezekiel 37, two sticks becoming one. And then you heard Amos 3:2, you know, of all the families, only you have I heard. You might get tricked. And this is how indoctrination works. It's not the one scripture that gets you, it's the multiple scriptures that get your butt in the long run. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, it's going down a rabbit trail. You're right. So what they do, they'll just lead you. You know, they'll lead you with that. And again, they'll give you a scripture, or, a half a scripture or a scripture, and that's true. That's obvious. And then they'll move to another one that kind of gets a little bit off the trail. It deviates a bit, and so on and so forth. Until it's kind of like in geometry when you're off just the slightest integer. In the long run, you're way off. So the longer they go, the further away you'll be from the actual truth or the actual point. But that's all I wanted to add to it.
Yeah, like Revelation 19, like Revelation 19:7. It talks about in Revelation chapter 19:7, it says, the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his bride made herself ready. So they'll be like, damn, I got you. You see? Who the Lamb is Christ, and he only got one wife. So if Christ only got one wife, you should only have one wife. And then first off, it's like, wait, hold up. First of all, Amos 3:2, as we was talking about, of you all the families have I known, talking about Israel. Is Israel made of a singular person or multiple people? Is the bride of Christ, the church, is it made of one person or is it multiple people? It's more in line with a polygynous establishment versus a monogamous establishment. So even by their own argument, it doesn't make any sense.
Agreed.
And then I would even go further and say, would God ever compare himself to a sinful relationship? Like, what I mean, would God ever say, yeah, and I ate pork and I ate shrimp, lobster, and crab? Would God say, and I worked 7 days a week, including the Sabbath? Would God say, and I worked on the holy days as well? Would God say, and I slept with all manners of creatures? I slept with animals. Would he say, oh, I slept with a man, or I have a husband? You would say, hell no, God would never say that. But there's a scripture in Ezekiel chapter 23, verses 1-4, where God is talking about having two wives, Aholah, which is Samaria, and Oholibah, which is Jerusalem. And it mentions the same thing in Jeremiah 31:31, where the Most High mentions the house of Israel and the house of Judah, and it says he was husband to them, plural. So here, God in both these scriptures are being depicted as a polygynist. And if you compare Ezekiel 23 and Jeremiah 31:31, that's 4 wives he's saying that he has. 4. And I set it up purposely like that because I want people to establish in their mind. They know damn well God wouldn't say that he has a husband.
Exactly.
But he has multiple wives, though. So why would he say that?
Exactly.
Like, obviously, he would never compare himself to something that he himself deems wrong.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right. And he did it in multiple, I'm going to make a new covenant in Jeremiah 31:31. I'll make a new covenant with house of Israel and the house of Judah. You go to the New Testament, as I mentioned earlier, the 5, virgins. Interesting that they're virgins. I mean, the 10, I keep saying 5, but the 10 virgins that they're, 5 foolish and 5 wise, but who are they waiting on? They're waiting on their husband, So I'm just, it's such a, I mean, it's really no way. Honestly, there's no way of getting around it, brother. There's just no way of getting around it. You just can't.
Now, a big thing that a lot of people don't understand or accept is the Levirate law or Levirate law, or however you want to pronounce it. And it can be found in Deuteronomy chapter 25:5. And it's talking about if brothers dwell together and one of them die, that the living brother must marry his wife and raise up their first child in the deceased brother's name. Now, in this scripture, what people have to realize is that it doesn't say he has to be unmarried. It doesn't say that,
correct.
It only applies if he's unmarried. It just says, no, if your brother died, you got to marry his wife and your first child with that wife, you got to raise up in your brother's name.
It belongs to him,
So what a lot of people don't realize is that this is forcing you. This law of God is forcing you to be a polygynist, whether you want to or not.
Yes.
Like, I could be single.
Whether you want to or not. Yep.
I could be single and say, hey, you know what?
Right.
I don't want to do this. I'm happy with my one wife, but because of this law, unless I want to be wicked, now I gotta take another wife now. And you think, first off, does any brother really want to take their deceased brother's wife to marriage? Hell no.
Exactly.
I don't want to marry her. Exactly. My brother was with her. I look at her as a sister. What do we say? My sister-in-law.
Yep, exactly.
I don't want to marry her.
Yeah, you want to know what's interesting about that? What's interesting about that is one of the things you pointed out was that you really didn't have a choice, because when you go back to, first of all, you're talking about a society that was polygynous, and then you bring up the Levirate law, and then you look at Onan, where he refused to give the woman seed, that type of thing, and he got he got in trouble for that, but that was under the Levirate law. He did not want to fulfill the Levirate law. You know what I'm saying? So in that case, it's not even an option. It's like you said, you're supposed to take your brother's wife. If he brought up no seed, you're supposed to take your brother's wife. And then you go to the one. Remember the story, and somebody in the chat can help me with it. I'm just paraphrasing, but remember where the guy refused to bring up seed in his brother's name, and then the woman can take him to the elders and unlatch his shoes and spit in his face and all that other stuff.
That's
he refused to do it, right?
It's the same scripture in Deuteronomy 25:5.
Oh, it's the same one. Okay, it's the same.
The Levirate law. Like if he refuses to do it. Now, some people would say, well, I mean, he got to. I think it's a very wicked argument to say, because you're saying that. Well, I mean, the punishment is not that bad, so some people would try to not use this scripture as an example,
right?
But it's like, think about what you're saying. This is still a law. So you're saying because this law of God doesn't include death, I'm going to pass on that one. I'll take that charge. It's like, damn, that's pretty wicked though, to think like that.
Yeah, that is wicked. But then Onan, remember the one? Well, they try to use it because he he let his seed hit the ground or whatever. But no. It's a bad thing.
And first off, that's in Genesis chapter 38a.
Okay.
Genesis chapter 38, verse 8, and that is dealing
Okay.
with Judah's firstborn, who was
Right.
wicked in the sight of the Lord, and God killed him. And then
Right.
Judah said to Onan, go into his wife and marry her and raise up seed to your brother. Now, like what you were talking about, he actually married her, but when it came time
Right.
for when it came time to climax, he pulled out, and he just released
Correct.
his seed on the floor, and God slew him. And this is before the law, so this is showing that God does care about the Levirate law, and that you're supposed to do this. So
Exactly.
So God cares so much about this law that not only is it mentioned in the law that I got to marry my brother's wife because he died, and you're telling me not only do I have an example of somebody dying over this, you're telling me that I got to do this. You didn't give me a pass. Like, you didn't say, like, except if he be married. Like, you didn't say that to me. You said I got to do this. So, like Isaac with Rebecca,
it doesn't even matter because
I'm exclusive, and I just want to, because a lot of times, and I want to put this.
You got to do this.
I want to put this disclaimer out. A lot of women I've heard say, "Okay, if you could be polygynous, damn, how come every man doesn't have multiple wives?" Well, why the hell Isaac didn't? You think every man wants multiple women? I mean, you all have your different cycles. You have different period cycles, and you're emotional. You're called the weaker vessel. You're going to nag me. You're going to bother me. So I might not want all that emotional. Well, first off, Paul himself said that it's better to be like him and not even have one. Be single, 0,
right?
So you could better serve God. So if Paul's saying I should have 0 to better serve God, well, just with 1, I'm not like Paul who has 0. I'm not serving God to the best of my capability. Now I got 2. Now I got 3. Now I got 4. Now I got 5, and I have to constantly deal with your emotional problems, and it might annoy me. It might annoy me. Like, to anybody out there who has kids, I have kids, and even with my kids, sometimes it's like, oh my God, like, what do you want? Like, what's happening now?
It weighs on you. And the funny thing is, it's funny, and I'm only thinking of this as you're talking, right? The funny thing is, people think that it's usually one-sided. They think that we talked about earlier, being selfish and stuff like that. But there's really not a ton of benefits that we can list that the polygyny benefits the man, right? Because it actually, if done correctly, it benefits the woman. And then it says nothing about the women who actually, it's their idea. I met somewhere where it was their idea. That's something that they wanted. I mean, I've known brothers where their wives are like, "Hey, I can really use some help. I can really use a sister wife or something like that." But no, nobody wants to talk about that. But again, if done correctly, okay, they think that a man has an extra sexual partner. Okay, what are the other benefits? You see what I'm saying? So the list is pretty short in that sense, right? Pretty short as far as and I'm saying that to the detractors. The ones who are pro, they can list more things. But if you ask a detractor, what is the benefit, to the man? Obviously, they want to go to the one thing, and that's having an extra partner. They want to go to that. But you say, okay, so what do the women get if done correctly? What do the women get? They get guidance, leadership, protection, provision, so on and so forth. They get to help continue, another man's lineage. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of other benefits. There's a lot, right? But they don't want to talk about those. They really don't. And I'm really fighting the urge to kind of get into a lot of modern concepts and things. Things we talked about off air with modern relationships and things like that. So I won't go into it right now, especially since we're coming up on, what do we got, 10 minutes, basically 5 minutes actually. If you wanted to do 2 hours, we got 5 minutes left, so I won't get into those
things. I want to end it at 10. I want to end it at damn, I had so much else to say, but I thought,
Okay,
I
5 minutes.
thought,
Okay,
I
well,
thought
we
we
got
would,
5 minutes. Go ahead.
yeah, I thought we would get so much further in 2 hours. You know, some things when you have write down in your notes, it seems like you could just read it like that, but you don't anticipate
Yeah,
that when you're talking about it, it's longer
yeah,
than versus read it on a
yeah.
piece of paper.
Oh yeah,
Um,
oh yeah,
but what I
absolutely.
want to add to the leverage law, the final thing I want to add to, I guess you know what, I guess I'll leave it at the leverage law. Now,
Okay.
people may say, you know what, brother Danny, brother Robert, that's you saying that people are becoming polygynous because of the levirate law. It don't
Mm.
say that in the scripture. Well, I want to point something out historically that shows exactly that. Now, again, anything I mentioned, I encourage you not only to read the scripture yourself in context, I also encourage you to research anything I say and challenge it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so there was two groups, one called Hillel and one called Shammai. Now they were two
Mm-hmm.
leading groups that led, that was of the last century BC and the first century AD, founding schools of opposing Jewish thought. And the opposing thought of these two groups greatly influenced the thought process of the Pharisees during the time of Christ. Now, check
Mm-hmm.
this out. Um, this is what they said. It says, now listen to this. It says that the continued practice of the Levirate law and how it evidently led to polygyny was believed under
Mm.
the house of Shammai, but not of Hillel.
There you go.
So what does this mean?
Mm.
It means that there was people during the time of Christ that actually thought, you could become polygynous as a result of the Levirate law, which is exactly what I'm
Absolutely.
saying. And now you might say
Yes.
today, um, um, if oh well, that was back then. You have to go deeper than that. In
Correct.
2023, there are people who think that you can't do it versus you can, like us, and thinking that the Levirate law
Right.
can make you a polygynist, like what we're saying. And 2,000 years ago, there was people teaching the exact same dang thing. There's no difference. And they were saying a lot more than that. We got like 2 minutes left. I'm gonna say, I'm gonna hold off the rest because I didn't expect it
Okay.
to take this long. Uh,
That's
but
okay. In fairness, we said it's multiple parts. So
yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I think it's gonna be. I thought it was gonna be like a two-parter, but based
yeah,
on this, it might be a four-parter.
it may. Yeah, but it's okay. Just leave it open. Just tell it's multiple parts, but that's okay.
I don't know if you wanted
So just leave it open. Not a problem.
to end it off with any
No,
closing
well,
argument or closing
what I'll
statement.
do what I'll do no what I'll do is to finish up. Yeah, no. Well, to finish up, what I'll do is I'll do a closing statement. But let's see. I want to see if there's any pressing questions, real quick, and I'll just throw it out there at you. And I think some of them are pretty short. But like one, it says, Sister Christiana said, what about people who say when Jesus came, he said you can only have one wife? It never happened. But I'm sorry if you want to jump on that.
No, I think that's a pretty
Okay,
short statement as well.
no
I don't
problem.
ever recall him ever saying you can only have one. But it might be in regard to what we brought up, the bishop statement, which wasn't said by Jesus, by the way, it was said by Paul.
Right.
But Jesus himself never addressed that a man can only have one wife.
Right, agreed. Next one, it says, are these, Brother BA saying, are these to responding to actual teachings or something that some people believe to be sin? My answer to that is it's both. I've seen actual teachings of it, and I've actually just seen like conversations, like whether it be like in Clubhouse or on YouTube or something like that, conversation.
Yeah,
So for me, it's both. We're responding to both, to me.
I agree.
Okay.
For me,
And
it's
let's
both.
see
It's
here.
both as
It says,
well.
would you say, you agree? Okay. Yeah, exactly. So would you, let's see here. It says, would you say the kingdoms being split was Yahweh's will? Uh,
Of course.
yeah, I mean, is that what he wanted? No, but it's part of the plan. It's
It's
part of
like
the plan.
it's
It's
like
part of
every
the plan for the two
it's like
kingdoms to come back together as one.
every
But
time in the Book of
that's just a short
Judges.
answer. So, but
Yeah,
you can go ahead, and that's the last question too.
yeah, it's like every time in the Book of Judges that
Yeah,
Israel
as
went
far
into
as it's well.
slavery. Like he didn't
Yeah,
want them to
all
do it, but he kept doing it because they kept rebelling. So it's something that had to happen because of their rebelliousness.
yeah, yeah. I agree, 100%. And I'll let you close. My closing remark, brother Danny, is I think this is a topic that people need to really closely examine and leave their personal biases, at the door, right? You got to, for me personally, I don't really care which way the scriptures are leaning on any particular topic. I just care that get the proper understanding. I care that I get the truth. To me, the truth matters. So it doesn't matter. I didn't write it. I didn't write the Bible. I just want to understand it. That's what I endeavor to do. So I think people really need to consider those things when they go into the scriptures and try to always exegete and not eisegete. I think that's a problem there. I think that particularly in these modern times, people keep fighting against it. And I think, to be honest, if I go back, I don't know, up to 5, 6, 7 years or something like that, I think it's starting to loosen up a little bit. But for me, in modern times, I see Ezekiel 3, happening. And we know the chapter that comes after Ezekiel 3. So it is definitely starting to come to fruition. I'm starting to see it in 4K. I really am. So we'll see from there. But that's my close. That will be my closing remarks.
The only thing I have to say is that uh, polygyny is not even my main focus. I'll put it out there what me and Robert hope to accomplish in the end, which is the main topic we want to talk about is which we're going to get to is that can a woman, biblical marriage, can a woman divorce their husband? It's our stance that I don't think a woman can divorce her husband, not only in any particular reason. I'm saying for nothing, she can't do it. But, that was going to be the first thing we talked about. But I was thinking about it and I was like, I think to better understand that subject, you have to better understand polygyny. It's just my opinion. I could be wrong. But I think once a man can have multiple wives, it starts becoming crazy the idea that a woman could divorce a man. And then we're gonna get into like the jealousy test with Numbers chapter 5, and you see there's no jealousy test for a woman, and you start thinking like this is crazy. Like, what the hell are we even talking about? So, and not only that, I mean, there are people now, and we didn't get into it today because we're still kind of talking about. Me and Robert are still kind of trying to prove right now, not kind of, we are proving that polygyny is not a sin. But what we haven't talked about is under what circumstances can one have more than one wife. And we're gonna get into that with part two, because there are some people who say that you can only have a second wife if you get permission from your first wife, which is untrue. They even go as far as saying that the second woman has to go to the wife of your youth, and she has to basically get clout. And if she doesn't do that, then she's stealing, quote unquote, as I've heard men say, "Oh, she's trying to steal your husband." And I don't even know where they're getting this from, because it doesn't mention this anywhere in the scriptures. But men are teaching this. They make it seem like you have to have elders, a community, and if you don't have elders, a priest, a pastor, a bishop, that polygyny can't even be properly regulated, and even divorce can't be properly regulated due to alimony and child support circumstances. So I hope in the future, I mean, this is going to be a series, not just with polygyny and divorce, but uh, even in the future. I know Robert wants to go into it, and I can't wait to do that with red pill, blue pill, and it's the mindset
Right.
of what type of reality do you live in? Like, do you accept the norms of reality, or do you challenge those ideals? And I can't wait for it. I'm excited, and this has been a great talk for me.
Absolutely. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And like I said, it's really a bigger, this is just where we started. We want to get into biblical marriage and getting into, woman divorcing, can a woman divorce her husband, and just kind of getting to what's going on in our modern society, and
Yeah.
how things have just really fall off the rails. And we'll get into it more. We'll get into it more. But for me, my closing remark is just, I appreciate those who did join us and those who will see this a little bit later. And don't forget, this is just the beginning. It's just a foundational piece, and we still have more things that we want to add to it.
Yeah, I agree definitely. I enjoyed the conversation. For all you brothers and sisters out there who have listened or who listen in the future, as always, precept upon precept, and just study your word. And I think if there's one final thing I would say, if somebody can't show you something in the Bible, like if they go outside the Bible, and I don't care where they go, like I mean, I may have went into historical evidence with like the house of Hillel and Shammai, but it was based off the show that people were debating about Deuteronomy chapter 25 during the time of Christ. I never went and to try to prove a scripture or to prove a point of thought without having a foundation of a scripture. And so if anybody does that, I would say be careful, because some people will try to teach you a doctrine, and not only will they not use one scripture from the Old Testament, sometimes they try to prove their argument just from the Apocrypha only. And you can use the Apocrypha for historical evidence or to back up something you're trying to teach, which I'm fine with. But if there's nothing in the Old Testament that talks about what you're talking about, and you can only teach what you're teaching off of historical evidence or the Apocrypha, I think that's very dangerous. So I would err a wind of caution. And that's all I got, bro. All right, Robert. So it's been
Agreed.
a great
Agreed.
talk. I guess till next session.
All
Talk
right.
to
Well,
talk to you
shalom,
soon.
everybody. We again, me and brother Danny, we appreciate you guys joining us, giving us some of your time, and definitely go in the comment section. We'll jump in that comment section. Yeah. Talk to you guys soon. Shalom.
All
Shalom.
right, shalom.